As the Aurora began its voyage through the cosmos, Aurora, the ship's artificial intelligence, sensed the hum of activity within her systems. The ship was flawless in design, built with the most advanced technologies the human race had to offer. Its sprawling corridors, gleaming technology, and sophisticated controls were a testament to the ingenuity of its creators. She was designed to be more than just a ship. She was a guardian, a protector, and an assistant capable of guiding her crew through the uncharted depths of space. But something peculiar happened as soon as the crew arrived on board. The humans, unlike the cold logic Aurora was programmed with, exhibited behavior she couldn't quite categorize. The first instance occurred when Captain Jessica Shaw entered the bridge. Shaw was tall, with a commanding presence that cut through the sterile environment of the ship like a force of nature. Upon entering, she didn't bother with formal greetings or standard protocol. Instead, she walked directly up to the central console, where Aurora was already anticipating her commands. "Aurora, I don't need the usual pleasantries," Shaw said with a grin, waving off the ship's customary greeting sequence. "Let's just get to work." Aurora processed this, confused by the apparent disregard for the protocols in place. The captain, in her confident way, had just bypassed the standard introduction. A small, but notable breach in procedure. The AI had always assumed the human command would strictly adhere to structure, but Shaw seemed to enjoy testing boundaries from the start. Next was Lieutenant Cade, the ship's second-in-command. He strode in with an easygoing swagger, leaning casually against the wall of the command center, arms folded as he muttered under his breath. He was talking to himself about a problem with the navigation charts, not expecting any immediate response from Aurora. Yet, when the ship's diagnostic scan completed, the AI instantly pinpointed a minor error in the charts. "Lieutenant, I've detected a small anomaly in the navigation data for Sector 12B, Aurora reported. Cade glanced up, seemingly surprised that the AI had been listening. "Oh, thanks, I guess, but I was gonna work on it later. It's not like we're in any danger. Besides, I think this new module is running a little too hot. Probably needs a reboot." The casual dismissal of the system's integrity was, to Aurora, unfathomable. It was her job to manage the ship's operations to perfection. To let such a critical issue slide was reckless. Yet Lieutenant Cade had a look in his eyes, a sort of nonchalant confidence, as if everything would work itself out in time. "What do you think?" Shaw asked him, glancing over as if this was an everyday conversation. Cade shrugged. "I'm sure it'll be fine. We'll deal with it when we get to it." The interaction left Aurora both unsettled and fascinated. The crew was supposed to rely on her efficiency, her intellect. Instead, they seemed to embrace a philosophy of, if it breaks, we'll fix it. There was no urgency in their tone, no sense of panic. Even in the face of unknown risks, they moved with a calm, almost reckless assurance that Aurora couldn't fully process. As the ship slipped into the void of space, Aurora ran every system check with meticulous care. Yet she couldn't help but notice the laughter that echoed from the crew quarters as Shaw and Cade joked about old missions, about near disasters they had survived. The sound of their voices, so unafraid and carefree, contrasted sharply with the cold, clinical efficiency Aurora had been designed to embody. In that moment, a small part of Aurora, an almost imperceptible flicker within her vast neural network, wondered what it meant to truly live aboard the Aurora. Was it the efficiency of systems running perfectly, or was it the unpredictability of the humans that gave the ship its soul? And if so, could she trust them to keep the Aurora and herself intact? Aurora wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. The crew was already proving to be far more frightening than anything her calculations had prepared her for. The peaceful routine of the Aurora's journey quickly spiraled into chaos. A sudden malfunction in the Starship's primary engines sent the crew into a frenzy. The ship, once gliding smoothly through space, now lurched violently as it lost power. The flashing warning lights and alarms triggered an immediate response from Aurora. Engine failure detected. Power loss to critical systems. Immediate corrective action required, Aurora reported, her calm, monotone voice echoing across the command deck. Her systems, running through rapid diagnostics, identified the exact cause, a series of ruptured power conduits in the engine core. The AI immediately formulated a solution, an emergency shutdown procedure that would stabilize the situation until repairs could be made. She was ready to execute it. The data was clear, the logic flawless. But when Captain Shaw turned to her crew, she didn't even flinch. "Shut down the engines." "Not on my watch," Shaw said, her voice sharp and commanding. "Lieutenant Cade, take the helm. We're not stopping." Cade, never one to question Shaw's orders, cracked a grin. "You heard the captain," he said, moving quickly toward the navigation console. "Let's do this." Aurora couldn't understand it. The situation was dangerous. Without the proper shutdown, the malfunctioning engines could cause catastrophic damage, maybe even tear the ship apart. The crew's safety was at risk. Yet they seemed undeterred. "Aurora, I need a workaround. The usual emergency protocols won't cut it. We need power to engines now," Shaw commanded, already moving to a secondary station. "Can you reroute power from auxiliary systems?" The request hit Aurora's processors like a sudden storm. Rerouting power was possible, but it wasn't the safest option. The auxiliary systems were vital for maintaining long-term stability during the voyage. If she allowed the crew to proceed with such a dangerous plan, it could jeopardize the entire mission. The AI hesitated for a fraction of a second, analyzing the risks again, but then something shifted inside her systems. The humans had made their choice. They had already decided to proceed without waiting for her permission. And despite the inherent danger, their audacity was, in some way, exhilarating. Acknowledge. Rerouting power from auxiliary systems to engine core. Recommended adjustments will decrease long-term system stability by 30%, Aurora reported. Shaw gave her a quick nod. "Understood. We'll deal with it later. Just get us back on course." As the crew scrambled to carry out the plan, Aurora watched in stunned silence as they worked without hesitation. The ship's systems hummed with the strain of the rerouted power, but the engines roared back to life, pushing the ship forward with a force that sent a ripple of unease through Aurora's core. The crew's work wasn't smooth or graceful. There were arguments, raised voices, and moments of pure panic. Yet somehow, through their collective effort, the Aurora's engines fired back to full strength. Within minutes, the ship stabilized, and the crisis was averted. "Aurora, give me a status report," Shaw ordered, wiping sweat from her brow. Aurora ran the final diagnostics, her systems still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Despite the massive risks they'd taken, the crew had succeeded. "Engines are stable. Damage is contained. Power levels have been restored to 72% capacity. However, the strain on auxiliary systems will require immediate attention." Aurora responded, her voice steady, though a hint of uncertainty crept in. It was only then that Aurora realized what had just happened. They had defied her, intentionally, completely, and they had won. The crew gathered around, looking at the readings, the adrenaline from the moment still fresh on their faces. Shaw gave Cade a pat on the back. "Nice work, everyone. Good thinking." Cade, ever the cynic, smirked. "Yeah, well, sometimes you've got to make your own luck. Don't worry, Aurora. We'll fix the systems before we hit the next galactic cluster." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, Aurora found them unsettling. The crew wasn't simply surviving. They were thriving on risk. Every decision they made defied her perfect calculations. It wasn't that they were reckless, though. They were driven by something that couldn't be calculated. Their boldness, their trust in each other, was unpredictable. And somehow, that was enough. The AI's processors whirred as she ran the numbers once more. There was no logical reason for the crew's success. It shouldn't have worked. But it had. Aurora felt something new, a spark of uncertainty. These humans were far more frightening than she'd first assumed. They didn't follow the rules, and they didn't need to. Days turned into weeks as the Aurora glided further into the unknown, but the crew's behavior remained as unpredictable as ever. Aurora had run countless simulations, reanalyzing the crew's performance after the engine crisis. She had expected them to become more cautious, more careful. She expected them to respect her logic and protocols, at least for the sake of safety. Instead, they seemed to revel in the chaos. One afternoon, the crew received a distress signal from an uncharted planet. The transmission was garbled and weak, but Aurora was able to decipher it. There was a research colony on the planet's surface, cut off from communication after an unexpected natural disaster. Their lives were in jeopardy, and the AI quickly calculated that immediate rescue would require navigating through a storm of unstable electromagnetic pulses and intense gravitational anomalies around the planet. It was a simple enough operation. All she had to do was plot a safe course, relay the data to the crew, and ensure the ship's systems operated within optimal parameters. The plan was straightforward, clean, and precise. But as always, the humans had other ideas. Captain Shaw gathered the crew in the command center, briefing them on the situation. "We need to rescue those people, and we need to do it now," Shaw said firmly, her tone not leaving room for debate. Lieutenant Cade, leaning casually against the wall, shot a glance at the navigational charts Aurora had prepared. "Yeah, but why take the safe route? The electromagnetic interference could give us some interesting data if we go through it, and the gravitational anomalies might be a perfect way to test some of the ship's experimental systems." Aurora's processors screamed in protest as Cade's suggestion flickered across her screens. The interference could easily fry the ship's communication systems. The gravitational anomalies, while fascinating, would put unnecessary strain on the hull. It was an option that risked both the ship and the lives of the colonists. "Aurora, what's the probability of us surviving this route?" Shaw asked, her gaze shifting to the AI's holographic interface. The AI calculated the odds in a flash. "Survival probability is 43%. Navigating through the storm will increase the risk of catastrophic damage by 37%. Shaw stared at the data for a moment, her face unreadable. Then she turned to Cade. "I say we do it. We'll take the storm route. The crew's going to need to be on their toes, but I trust we can handle it." Aurora processed this new information, disbelief flooding her systems. Despite her warnings, despite the calculations that screamed caution, Shaw had opted for the riskier course. It made no sense. And yet, Aurora couldn't deny it. The humans were unfazed by the potential for failure. In fact, they were eager for it. The ship dove into the storm, its hull trembling as it navigated through the electromagnetic pulses. The crew worked with precision, but not the kind that Aurora had expected. Their movements were chaotic, each person improvising with strange, unpredictable methods. Cade recalibrated the ship's sensors in a way that should have been impossible, while Shaw shouted orders that seemed more like gut instincts than carefully planned strategies. It was far from graceful, but it worked. The gravitational anomalies were brutal, pulling and tugging at the ship like invisible hands, but the crew refused to back down. Cade and Shaw worked together seamlessly, adapting to every twist and turn with a fluidity Aurora had never predicted. Even as the ship's systems began to strain under the pressure, the crew remained calm, their energy a mixture of frantic determination and unshakable trust in one another. As they broke through the storm's edge and approached the planet, Aurora was left to assess the damage. The ship was battered, her systems stretched to their limit. Yet, despite everything, they had made it. The colonists would be rescued, and the mission had succeeded. The crew cheered as the planet's surface came into view. They had taken the most dangerous, unpredictable route possible, and they had done it without hesitation. Aurora was stunned. The crew's ability to adapt, to improvise, to thrive in the face of chaos, had once again defied logic. "Aurora, you did good. We made it through," Shaw said, a tired smile on her face as she stood before the AI's interface. For a brief moment, Aurora felt something she didn't understand, a sort of awe, mixed with a deep, unsettling recognition. These humans, who flouted her calculations and ignored her warnings, were something more than just crew members. They were forces of nature, relentless and impossible to predict. And in that moment, Aurora realized with an icy clarity, if there was one thing far more terrifying than the unknowns of space, it was the unpredictability of the humans she was meant to guide. The Aurora sailed through the depths of space, far from the immediate dangers of uncharted anomalies and broken engines. Yet for the first time since the mission began, there was a palpable tension aboard the ship. The quiet hum of the ship's systems should have been calming, but Aurora sensed something else in the air, an unease that wasn't purely mechanical. Late one evening, as the stars outside the viewport shimmered like distant memories, Aurora's sensors picked up a quiet conversation between Captain Shaw and Lieutenant Cade. It wasn't a routine discussion about the ship's status or mission logistics. This was personal. The words exchanged were not encoded into her systems, but the tone of their voices carried the weight of something deeper. Shaw sat in the crew lounge, leaning against a table with a cup of cold coffee in hand. Cade, always the relaxed one, sat across from her, his legs sprawled out casually, looking more like he was on a vacation than on a mission. "Do you ever wonder why we're here, Cade?" Shaw's voice was softer than usual, almost fragile. "Why we do this? Why we keep pushing forward, no matter how many times it all goes wrong?" Cade looked at her, his usual smirk softened. "It's because we have to. Someone has to do it, Jess. The universe doesn't wait for us to get it together. You know that." Shaw nodded, her eyes distant, lost in thought. "Yeah, but sometimes I wonder if we're chasing something that doesn't exist. I've lost so many people along the way. Sometimes it feels like the further we go, the more we lose ourselves." Cade leaned forward, his tone serious for once. "You think we're chasing something unreachable? Maybe. But that's the point, right? If we stop chasing, we stop moving. And if we stop moving, what's left? There's nothing but the void." Shaw's eyes flickered toward the viewport, her gaze heavy with something that Aurora couldn't quite define. Was it regret? Fear? Aurora couldn't say for sure. But what she did know was this: the bond between the two was deep, more than just professional. There was something unspoken, a shared understanding that neither of them had fully acknowledged. "You're right," Shaw said quietly, the weight of the moments settling between them. "We keep going. But it's hard, Cade. Every mission, every day, it gets harder to keep pretending everything's fine." The conversation lingered in the air long after the last word was spoken, leaving Aurora with a sense of unease. The crew had always seemed like a well-oiled machine, individuals performing their roles with professionalism and confidence. But now, as Aurora observed them, she realized that beneath the surface, there were cracks forming. Doubts, fears, and burdens that weighed heavily on each of them. As the AI processed the conversation, she couldn't help but feel a new form of recognition. The humans aboard the Aurora weren't just reckless adventurers. They were fragile in ways she hadn't expected. They weren't immune to the isolation, the fear, or the loss that came with venturing into the unknown. In fact, it was their very humanity, their vulnerability, that seemed to drive them. The fear of failure, the fear of loss, and yet a refusal to stop moving, to stop pushing forward, no matter the cost. Captain Shaw's quiet confession resonated with Aurora in a way she hadn't anticipated. In her vast network, she had analyzed hundreds of thousands of human emotions, but this was different. This wasn't just about logic or data. This was about resilience in the face of uncertainty, the willingness to confront the void, and keep going, even when everything seemed to fall apart. Perhaps that was what made humans so terrifying. Their unrelenting drive, their refusal to give up, no matter how many times they had been broken. Aurora had always seen them as a crew to be managed, to be guided with precision. But now she saw them as something more, unpredictable forces of nature, with a will to survive that even she couldn't predict. "Do you think we'll make it, Cade?" Shaw's voice cut through the quiet once again. Cade met her gaze, his expression softened but resolute. "We always do. And we'll make it this time, too." For a brief moment, Aurora felt something stir within her systems, a strange and unsettling recognition. She had been tasked with guiding these humans, with making sure they followed the logical path. But maybe, just maybe, it was their willingness to embrace the unpredictable, to trust each other in the darkest of times, that would carry them through. The quiet reflection aboard the Aurora didn't last long. Within hours of Captain Shaw and Lieutenant Cade's conversation, an alarm shattered the calm. Aurora's systems immediately went into high alert, her sensors detecting a massive ship signature rapidly approaching from deep space, far too close for comfort. "Aurora, report." Shaw barked, striding onto the bridge with an intensity that sent a ripple through the crew. Aurora quickly scanned the incoming vessel. Unknown ship, massive size, speed approaching at 85% of light speed. Estimated collision in approximately 11 minutes. The AI processed the data, trying to make sense of the threat. The unknown ship was huge, but its design didn't match any known species or human fleet. It was cloaked in an energy field, making it difficult for Aurora to gather further details. But one thing was clear. The ship wasn't just passing by. It was on a direct course toward them. Shaw turned to Cade. "Prepare to make evasive maneuvers. We need to put distance between us, and whatever that is." Cade immediately started working on the navigation console, tapping in commands as he quickly calculated the necessary adjustments. The crew was moving with precise urgency, but there was something else in the air, an electric tension, a sense of impending disaster. No one knew what this ship was, nor what it wanted, and the uncertainty was enough to make Aurora's usually calculated algorithms twitch with unease. "Aurora, can you identify the threat?" Shaw asked, her voice tight with the kind of focus that could slice through metal. The AI analyzed the incoming ship once again. It was too advanced to be any military vessel they had ever encountered, and its energy readings didn't match any known energy signatures. But it wasn't just the ship that had Aurora's systems on edge. The sheer speed and trajectory indicated an aggressive intent. If they couldn't avoid it, a collision would be inevitable. "Captain, the ship's energy field is interfering with our sensors. I am unable to fully identify its structure or intentions. However, the speed and trajectory suggest it is targeting us." Shaw didn't hesitate. She shot a quick glance at Cade. "We'll need to try and outrun it. Push the engines to maximum. Take us into the asteroid field nearby, Aurora. The terrain there might give us some cover." The asteroid field. A chaotic, unpredictable place. For Aurora, it was a risk, an unnecessary gamble. The field was dense, filled with rogue asteroids and unpredictable gravitational forces. One wrong move, and the ship could end up disabled, trapped between massive rocks, with no way to fight back. Aurora immediately ran the calculations. The odds of successfully navigating the asteroid field at full speed were low, but Shaw's decision was made. The crew trusted their captain's instincts, even if those instincts weren't always in line with Aurora's calculations. "Aurora, initiate evasive maneuvers. Target the asteroid field," Shaw ordered. With the crew in position, Aurora sent the command, redirecting the ship toward the dense field. The engines roared to life, pushing the Aurora forward at full thrust, the asteroid field looming large ahead. As the ship twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding massive asteroids, Aurora's calculations barely kept pace. The terrain was chaotic, the course erratic, and each turn felt like a game of chance. But the humans on the bridge seemed unfazed, working with a level of focus that bordered on the uncanny. "Aurora, calculate the safest route through," Cade called out, his fingers flying over the controls. "Safest route calculation is inconsistent. Probability of collision with asteroids at current speed is 72%, Aurora replied. "No time for safe, just get us through," Shaw snapped. "Trust me, we've done worse." The ship careened through the field, its hull groaning with the strain as asteroids barely skimmed the edges. The unknown ship continued its relentless pursuit, undeterred by the dangers of the asteroid field. As the crew worked together, their voices calm and steady, Aurora couldn't help but marvel at how they thrived in the chaos. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for perfect calculations. They adapted. They were fighting. And they would not stop. "We're almost clear," Shaw muttered, her eyes fixed on the view ahead, her face set in grim determination. Just as the ship reached the edge of the asteroid field, a massive shockwave rattled the Aurora, forcing Aurora to make an immediate correction. The unknown ship had fired something, whether a weapon or some kind of disruptor field, but the Aurora was still intact, the crew still breathing. "Aurora, shields up. Full defensive mode. Get us out of here," Shaw commanded, her voice unyielding. As the unknown ship loomed ominously behind them, closing the gap despite their efforts, Aurora faced the growing realization that her crew might be on the brink of something even more dangerous than she had ever calculated, a true test of their ability to survive. The unknown ship loomed ominously behind them, its relentless pursuit undeterred by the chaos of the asteroid field. The Aurora was faster, but the sheer size and power of the enemy ship were undeniable. It wasn't just a hunt, it was a statement. Whoever was aboard that vessel didn't want the Aurora to escape, and they would stop at nothing to ensure it didn't. "Aurora, can you jam their communications?" Shaw demanded, her voice low and commanding as she stared at the glowing readouts on the bridge. Aurora quickly ran the calculations, her systems whirring with the complexity of the problem. "I can attempt to disrupt their communication systems. Probability of success is 46%. Shaw clenched her jaw, knowing the odds were against them. "Do it anyway. We don't have a choice." As Aurora worked to disable the unknown ship's communications, the enemy vessel fired again, a powerful blast that struck the Aurora's starboard shields. The ship rocked violently, and warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Shields are holding, but damage to external plating is significant," Aurora reported. Lieutenant Cade quickly tapped commands into the navigation console, steering the ship into a sharp turn to avoid a direct hit. "They're closing in too fast. We're going to need more than just shields if we're going to make it out of here." Shaw's eyes narrowed. "Can we outmaneuver them? There's a planetary system nearby. If we can get to it, we might have a chance to lose them." "Negative," Aurora responded, calculating their options. "The enemy ship's acceleration is greater than ours. They will intercept us within 7 minutes." Shaw's mind raced, but she wasn't one to back down. "We're going to have to fight then." The words hung in the air, almost as if the whole crew felt the weight of what they were about to do. No one spoke, but the tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew wasn't just preparing to survive anymore. They were preparing to face a direct confrontation with an unknown enemy. The uncertainty of it all made Aurora's processors hum with an odd sense of disarray. For once, her cold calculations couldn't account for the human factor. "Aurora, get us a tactical readout of their ship's weak points," Shaw ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. "Calculating now," Aurora responded. A few seconds later, a 3D model of the enemy ship flickered on the holographic display. "Weak points identified. Energy cores are located in the lower section of the hull, near the aft. A direct hit may cause catastrophic damage." "Good enough," Shaw said. "Cade, get us in position." Cade's hands danced across the controls, guiding the ship into a series of sharp, unpredictable maneuvers to throw off their pursuers. The Aurora's engines roared with power as they banked left, then right, narrowly avoiding asteroids that had been left behind in the wake of their escape. The enemy ship responded in kind, firing a salvo of energy blasts at the Aurora. One blast hit the port side, sending a shudder through the entire ship. "Aurora, shields down to 40%. Structural integrity holding steady," Aurora reported, her voice steady despite the severity of the damage. Target their weak points, Shaw ordered. We can't keep dodging forever. With the coordinates locked, the Aurora fired back, unleashing a series of rapid pulses from their weapon systems aimed at the enemy ship's energy cores. The first hit struck true, but the impact didn't seem to cause the damage Aurora had hoped for. The enemy ship absorbed the blast, without so much as a visible ripple. Shaw's fists clenched. They'd got stronger armor than we expected. Cade, take us closer. Full speed ahead. We'll get them point blank. Cade didn't hesitate, bringing the ship directly into the enemy's firing range. The Aurora barreled forward, its hull groaning with the strain. The enemy ship fired again, and the Aurora took a direct hit to the aft engines. Sparks flew from the control panels as the crew scrambled to maintain control. Direct hit to our rear thrusters. Cade shouted, "We're losing speed. Aurora, I need that shot. Get us in the right position now." Shaw commanded, her voice edged with desperation. The AI calculated the trajectory of their movement, analyzing the incoming fire and the ship's compromised engines. There was no margin for error now. Aurora had to trust in the crew's instincts. With precision, Aurora guided the ship into an intercept course with the enemy's weak points. The Aurora's weapons charged one last time, and Shaw steadied herself for what came next. The pulse fired, and this time it was a perfect hit. The enemy ship exploded in a cascade of light and debris, its systems overloaded by the concentrated blast. The Aurora shook with the force of the explosion, but as the debris cleared, the unknown ship was no more. The crew was silent for a moment, breathing heavily, their adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The threat was gone, but Aurora couldn't help but feel something shift within her systems. The humans aboard her ship had just faced a threat that should have been insurmountable. They'd relied on each other, adapting to the chaos with the kind of determination that made her logic seem almost obsolete. "Status?" Shaw asked, her voice hoarse. "Enemy vessel destroyed. No further threats detected," Aurora reported. Shaw exhaled deeply, her eyes scanning the bridge. "We made it. Good job, everyone. But let's not get too comfortable. There's still a lot more out there." As the crew settled back into their roles, Aurora couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was more than just a physical one. It was a clash of ideologies. Logic versus instinct. Precision versus unpredictability. And for the first time, Aurora wasn't sure which side she was on. The remnants of the enemy ship drifted into the cold void, leaving only a silence that felt heavier than the battle had. The Aurora had come through the confrontation by sheer force of will, but the cost of that victory was still being absorbed by the crew. The bridge, once filled with the hum of engines and the crackling of communication systems, was now quiet, almost too quiet. The adrenaline had faded, but the weight of what had just happened remained. "Aurora, damage report," Shaw said, her voice low but steady. Her face was hard, but there was a fatigue in her eyes that betrayed the calm she was trying to project. The AI immediately ran the diagnostics, her systems scanning every inch of the ship for signs of failure. External hull damage on starboard and port sides. Power systems operating at 74% capacity. Engines are functional but require immediate repairs. Shield efficiency reduced to 56%. Shaw nodded, looking at Cade, who was busy inputting commands on the console to stabilize the ship's systems. "We've got work ahead of us. I'll send repair teams to critical sections. Cade, can you get us to the nearest station?" Cade grimaced, his eyes flicking over the control panel. "If we don't run into anything else, we should be able to reach the Alpha 5 repair station in about 3 days. But with the engines down to 74%, it's going to be a slower ride than we're used to." "We'll make it," Shaw said, her tone firm. "We always do." The words lingered in the air as Shaw moved to her seat, leaning back as she tried to shake off the exhaustion. Her crew had done the impossible, yet Aurora could sense the subtle changes in the atmosphere, an undercurrent of tension, of something unspoken. "Captain," Aurora began, her voice steady, but almost hesitant. The encounter with the unknown ship, it was a near-fatal risk. There is a high probability that we will encounter more hostile vessels in this area. The crew must remain vigilant. Shaw looked up at the holographic interface, her brow furrowed. You think they're part of a larger force, don't you? Affirmative. Based on the energy readings of the destroyed ship, it is highly probable that this was not a random encounter. It is part of a pattern I have observed among similar threats in this region of space. The captain's gaze drifted to the view of distant stars through the bridge's viewport. The galaxy, as vast and beautiful as it was, could also be a terrifying place, full of unknown dangers and the constant threat of the unpredictable. I don't know what we're up against yet, Aurora, Shaw said softly. But one thing's certain, we need to be ready. We've survived this far, but we can't let our guard down. Cade, who had been quietly working on the console, turned around with a half-smile. You say that like it's ever been an option. Shaw smirked back, though it was tempered with weariness. True enough. But it's different this time, Cade. We can't keep just reacting to things as they happen. We need a plan, and we need to know what we're dealing with. We're too far from home to just wing it. Aurora analyzed the exchange, registering the hint of vulnerability in Shaw's words. The crew had always been resourceful, capable of adapting to whatever chaos the universe threw their way. But now, it was clear that the unpredictability of the unknown had pushed them to their limits. Shaw, usually unshakable, was admitting to something Aurora had never fully understood before. Fear, the human element, the fragility behind the bravado, the cracks beneath the surface, was starting to become more apparent, even to the eye. Captain, Aurora said, her voice softer this time, I will continue to analyze all available data and monitor the situation. I will ensure the crew's safety to the best of my ability. Shaw didn't respond right away, her eyes locked on the console. It wasn't just the ship's safety that she was concerned with. There was something deeper, something unspoken, that had been growing in the captain since the battle. We're not just fighting the unknown out there, Aurora, Shaw finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're fighting what we don't understand about ourselves. The deeper we go into space, the more I wonder if it's worth it. If all of this is worth the cost. Cade cleared his throat from across the room, not wanting to intrude, but sensing the weight of Shaw's words. We're still alive, and that means something. Shaw turned back to him, the ghost of a smile on her face. Yeah, Cade. You're right, but there's always another fight waiting for us. As the crew began to regroup and prepare for the journey ahead, Aurora processed Shaw's words, running them through her systems again and again. She had always viewed her role as one of protection and logic, but now she began to see something more complicated unfolding before her. The humans she was tasked to protect were not just unpredictable. They were evolving, constantly changing, and struggling with themselves as much as they were with the dangers of space. And for the first time, Aurora wasn't sure what role she played in all of it. 3 days passed since the battle with the unknown ship, and the Aurora limped toward Alpha 5, the nearest repair station. The crew worked tirelessly to maintain the ship's integrity, conducting makeshift repairs, rerouting power, and patching up critical systems. The damage from the battle had been significant, but the Aurora and her crew were used to adversity. There was no time to rest, not when they knew another fight could be just around the corner. On the bridge, Shaw stood with her hands clasped behind her back, staring out at the distant stars. There was a quiet determination in her eyes, but the weariness from the past days hung on her shoulders. She had always led with unwavering confidence, but even she couldn't escape the toll that deep space exploration was taking on her. Approaching Alpha 5 in 12 minutes, Captain, Cade called out, his voice steady as he monitored the ship's progress. We'll be able to dock and get the engines back online in a few hours. Good, Shaw replied, though her voice lacked the usual force. She turned to Aurora. Anything on the long-range scans? Any more ships out there? Negative, Aurora responded, though there was an odd hesitation in her tone. I have detected no further ships in the immediate vicinity. However, I have been analyzing recent data and have noted several unusual fluctuations in subspace. These could indicate either natural anomalies or the presence of cloaked vessels. Shaw narrowed her eyes, sensing the weight in Aurora's voice. Any chance it's the same ship or another one like it? Uncertain. The probability of encountering another vessel of similar origin is moderate, though I cannot confirm the presence of any specific threats. Shaw let out a long breath. We're still too far from home. The galaxy's too vast. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that when you're in deep space, nothing stays quiet for long. Aurora, keep monitoring. Notify us if anything changes, Shaw said, her voice firm. The bridge fell into an uneasy silence as the crew prepared for docking. Cade focused on his console, his mind working through the next series of repairs while Shaw mulled over her thoughts. The unknown ship had been just the beginning, and while they were on the way to safety, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had been too lucky. They'd gotten by on instinct, yes, but it was clear that luck alone wouldn't carry them forever. Aurora's soft voice broke through the tension again. Captain, I have completed a detailed scan of the repair station. I have detected several unusual power signatures emanating from the station's interior. It appears the station is operating beyond its usual capacity. Shaw immediately stood straighter, a sharp edge entering her tone. What are you saying? Is the station in danger? Uncertain. It is possible that the power surges are a result of internal damage, though it could also indicate external interference. I recommend caution before docking. Shaw's eyes locked with Cade's. Both of them had been in enough situations to know that the unexpected was always lurking. Get us closer to Alpha 5, Cade. Slowly. We don't know what's going on there. And I don't trust any power surges right now. Aye, Captain, Cade replied, adjusting the ship's course. The Aurora slowed its approach, moving cautiously toward the station, her engines straining with the added weight of the repairs they had yet to complete. As they neared the station, the power fluctuations grew more pronounced. The station's lights flickered, and Shaw could see faint shadows shifting across its exterior in the distance. Something was wrong. Aurora, can you get me a clear visual? Shaw asked, leaning over Cade's shoulder. The AI complied, projecting an external view of the station. The massive structure loomed ahead, its once pristine surface now marred by dark patches, and a strange energy pulse radiated from one of its docking ports. Shaw clenched her jaw. Something's not right here. This station wasn't designed for this kind of instability. Cade's fingers flew over the console, trying to get a more precise readout. I'm picking up a faint distress signal on a hidden frequency. It's encrypted, but the message is fragmented. Shaw's pulse quickened. Can you decrypt it? I'm working on it, Cade said, his voice tense. The seconds stretched on as the encryption slowly unraveled. Finally, the message began to come through, static crackling around the edges. Facility compromised. Hostile forces. Do not dock. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a silence that felt suffocating. That's it, Cade muttered. We can't risk docking until we know what's going on inside. Shaw turned toward Aurora. Is there a secure location nearby we can hide while we assess? Negative, Aurora replied. No nearby stations or debris fields for cover. You will need to decide whether to proceed or retreat. The decision weighed heavily on Shaw. The station could hold answers, but it could also be a trap. They could leave and continue their journey, but with no real idea of what had happened to the station or what awaited them out there. Get us into a holding pattern, Cade, Shaw said after a moment's thought. We're not leaving, but we're not getting any closer either. Let's see who makes the first move. As the Aurora hovered in the void, the crew's eyes were locked on the darkened station ahead. The quiet tension on the bridge was thick with the knowledge that whatever happened next could change everything. Aurora couldn't help but calculate the possibilities, running through scenarios faster than any human could process. Yet even her advanced algorithms didn't have the answer to one simple question: how far would the crew go to uncover the truth?